Despite the increased awareness about women's rights in our many countries, including ourselves, and significant progress being made in the recent decades, there's still a number of old and new obstacles that remain on women's path to equality and justice. Now, DASTAK Foundation has been striving to work towards making Pakistan and generally South Asia safer and violence-free for women. And which is why we've put together this symposium, in order to discuss and deliberate upon interventions that can strengthen gender-based violence prevention in Pakistan. So in this very important panel discussion, we are establishing the importance of self-defense in empowering women within the local context of Pakistan. Let me start with introducing my guest speakers for this panel discussion. We've got respectable Madam Sheeba Shah. She was the first female IG of Pakistan, hailing from Shikarpur. Ms. Aaminah Tirmizi, she's Saving Nine's lead trainer, successfully having led a psychological first aid workshop within Saving Nine's mental health team at LUMS. Now, we've also got Barrister Asma Khawar, who is a human rights lawyer who has completed her bar at the Bar at Law from Lincoln's Inn. She has been specializing in cases of violence against women. She is a champion for women's rights. And joining me today, fortunately, is also Hira Amjad, who is an international gender equality consultant. And to our honor, the founder of DASTAK Foundation, she works on ground with all of us. She has a lot of experience in this regard. So without further ado, I'm going to ask my first speaker of the day to share her opening remarks on the importance of establishing self-defense for women empowerment. Madam Sheeba, over to you, please.
I'm Sheeba. I'm working in a prison department as a DIG, Women and Juvenile. First of all, I will thanks Anza Saqib to inviting me to such a nice talk to the forum about the women's violence, because I personally work in women prisons and handling with the directly to the women inmates who live behind the bars. We are giving a training and skills trainings to the women to get empowerment in and that first of all, they will in behind the prisons, they will get the labor charges and they will feed their families also. And the trainings like vocational training, we are conducted in present department, the computer literacy program over that. And we have a very good trainers for the beautician and about for these type of trainings. And we also have a gym facilities in present department. We are giving awareness sessions also, counseling sessions from the doctors to aware it that everybody have giving a chance to make a right to when they will go in the society, they have a good citizens.
We'll hear more about this. Thank you, and please stay with us. And I'm going to move on to Asma and Barrister Asma to ask for her introductory comments on the topic. Thank you.
Hello, very nice to be here. I'm honored to speak with such an esteemed panel. Really great to be here with Hira, Aaminah, and Anza. Thank you for having me. So violence against women is I would consider the first pandemic of Pakistan before COVID actually became a norm. And I say why this is a pandemic. It is widely accepted, understood, and is completely widespread in most areas in Pakistan. And the primary issue that we face, in particular as criminal lawyers, as civil lawyers in Pakistan, is that yes, we are what people don't understand is the difference between the legal practice as well as the laws. So Pakistan is a very heavily, overly legislated country. We have lots of laws, perhaps even more laws in many of Southeast Asian countries that do protect women. So violence against women, violence against laws protecting women against acid attacks, harassment, workplace harassment. But the problem here is that the legal procedure that has been put into place late in the 18th century, which has been barely amended because, and people ask me this, why has this legal procedure not been amended? Or your legal procedure, if I can get to that, is if I tell you, you have all these facilities, you go into a health club, you have a swimming pool, you have a gym, you have a guest rooms, you have a lovely restaurant. But in order to get to that, you have to go through a series of exercises that are possibly impossible to cater for any regular person. And you're like, why do I have to do 3 somersaults, go around Lahore, pay 10,000 rupees, go to the police station, go through all these unnecessary steps to access these things that are widely available to me? It's the same thing with laws in Pakistan, in particular for women that are facing domestic violence, is that the criminal procedure code is atrociously outdated. And when I say atrociously, I use this word with a heavy heart, because there are so many procedures where women, have to go through a very unfortunate amount of social interaction. So, and we don't have enough criminal lawyers in Pakistan that offer that facilitation. So, I mean, as a lawyer, my job is primarily just to handle the legal aspects of the case. But unfortunately, I don't do that. I can't do that because 80% of the cases that I handle are facilitation. The women that need to get their medical legal reports made, they have went to the wrong hospitals. They've gone to private hospitals because nobody wants to go to civil hospitals. So the facilitation that we need for women that are facing domestic violence is not present in the country, unfortunately. And when I say facilitation, we're talking police, we're talking medical reports, we're talking they need emergency cash for the first 3 months, we're talking they need jobs, they need to be told that they need psychological help, they need rehabilitation. So we don't have that in the country. And if you just compare the ratio of orphanages in Pakistan compared to domestic violence shelters, which we don't specifically have domestic violence shelters, we have general shelters, it is an alarming rate. And we also don't have enough female litigators, criminal litigators in Pakistan. That's like me telling you we don't have enough female gynecologists in Pakistan. The problem in Pakistan is that we have a very reactive approach to women and violence, which is very alarming, personally speaking, because considering it's the 21st century, Pakistan is developing, our exports are increasing, our employment is increasing, we're doing amazing research. We are going back in time when it comes to this thought process. This is like an 18th century response to women's rights and human rights, in fact. So if your lawyers in Pakistan and your policemen in Pakistan are of the belief that you have wronged your abusive husband, how can these people facilitate you? So we do not have enough of an infrastructure to help 52% of our population.
Aaminah.
I just wanted to start off with a little bit of context to what I do. So Saving Nine as a company creates safer spaces, and that looks like multiple things, and we work in several dimensions. So as Anza said, we work in first aid, we work in psychological first aid. We also create compassionate communities in schools by equipping teachers to be able to communicate in a way with students that makes them feel safe. We also have a development fellowship where students get the chance to work in underprivileged areas. And that kind of brings me to the topic at hand, the self-defense. We had the fellowship where one of our fellows decided that they wanted to empower women in rural areas by teaching them self-defense. And so we got together and we made that happen with a group of people working together. So we got a martial arts instructor and we went to the area of Bigwal, where we also run Pakistan's first female-led ambulance. And so our female ambulance workers, the EMPs, and general women from the community came together. They learned self-defense, and they have been kind of in the process of now that's becoming like an active thing in the community. The self-defense training is starting in schools. Specifically, younger girls are also getting the opportunity to learn martial arts and be able to help themselves, hopefully, in the event of something tragic happening.
Let's now revert to the woman of the hour, Hira. So Hira and I have done a lot of work on ground, and just like Aaminah said, she was one of the first support systems that I had. We wanted to kick off projects related to self-defense, and it's been a journey. We've never looked back. So Hira, please, over to you.
Okay, so Anza, first of all, thank you so much for such an overwhelming introduction earlier as well as now. And you should know that you can always count on me. And Aaminah, Asma, and Ma'am Sheeba, thank you so much for sharing such insightful comments. And, you know, when you were talking, I was just thinking that how all of this is linked to the aspect of cultural and structural violence in a patriarchal society like Pakistan, because the heart of the matter is that violence in our society is hidden in plain sight. It's everywhere. And the worst part is there is this lack of realization among those who are suffering from this violence. Cultural violence happens everywhere. It happens to our mothers, to our grandmothers, to our daughters, and men are also experiencing this flux of cultural violence from generations and decades. Now, let me just break it down here for you slightly. What is cultural violence? We need to ask this question, are our homes patriarchal? Yes, they are. Who owns the property? Whose name do we carry? So all of these things slowly and gradually contribute to this thought process where women are made to believe that you are not enough. And the work that we are doing here is we are trying to take that not from that sentence, and we are trying to help them realize that you are enough and you have the power. And you yourself are a being full of light, full of energy, who should never ever be subjected to violence. And that is where empowerment through self-defense comes in, that we introduce these creative interventions and strategies through which we slowly and gradually make them realize not just physically, but emotionally. And I'm sure Aaminah can elaborate more on that, that the power of mind needs to be coupled with the power of body. And that is when you are in a position to defend yourself, because gaslighting is something that I'm not sure, but I can talk about my experience, that most of us have experienced it firsthand in our relationships with our parents, with our friends. So this is where these kinds of interventions come in, where we teach them how to define personal space, how to understand the concept of boundaries. So the work that we are doing here and bringing all of you to this platform is that we need to join hands and join forces and mainstream empowerment through self-defense education in Pakistan.
Speaking to Aaminah, Aaminah, you know, it's very interesting that we spoke about violence by women and towards women, but most of it, like Asma also mentioned, there has to be a root cause. And we see a lot of unfairness, we see a lot of biasness, like Asma said, you know, just talking about it can often, you know, put labels, because like Hira had earlier mentioned, gender and victim blaming. Would you like to shed some light on the psychological thought process which women go through? Because as I see it, women here act more out of fear. Because if they feel empowered, and that's why we keep emphasizing on empowerment through self-defense, because if I feel secure in my body and my space and know how to defend myself, probably I will not be the person perpetrating violence, or will not let violence happen with me. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you, Anza. And I think, well, first of all, Asma, I wanted to say that I think it's commendable that you went and found ways to communicate with your clients, because that's so important. And I think you're right, like more people in law need to be able to communicate empathetically with victims of abuse and generally try to understand their point of view. And coming to you, Anza, I think where we start off here is a power dynamic here, right? There's a certain power dynamic where you see that people in power, that people who have influence, people who are listened to, they display that power through violence. They display that power through that severe dominance, right? And then that kind of changes your sensibilities as a woman to believe that if I am to be respected, if I am to be heard, if I am to be seen as, you know, an equal counterpart, then my behavior needs to look the same, right? And that is why we see a lot of violent behaviors coming up, as we were talking about. Why do they come up, right? So when the only benchmark to being heard, to having space, to being empowered, as you see that little like pedestal that the men are standing on, is that they're aggressive, they're go-getters, they'll you know, shout or scream or get their way by physical dominance, then that behavior being mimicked by women in society makes some kind of sense for people to witness, right? That if the only way out of the situation's power struggle is to see who can assert more physical dominance, then it is not surprising to see these kind of crimes, as you were talking about, come up.
Thank you, Aaminah. And speaking of catharsis, Hira, we've been interacting with a lot of young girls, and you've also heard a lot of their stories. And oftentimes, and you will agree that we keep hearing of such unresolved conflicts and issues with these women or young girls as well, where they're victims of abuse within the family and they're not allowed to speak about it. Why do you feel that self-defense can play a key role in making these women feel empowered for all that they've been through in the past, what they're going through now, and in the future?
Thank you, Anza, for a very important question. And before answering this, I would also like to commend what Asma just mentioned about having violence shelters specific for domestic violence survivors, because that is something that I have also experienced over the course of last few years, that we do not have sufficient spaces to accommodate women. And domestic violence is it's widespread in Pakistan. Like one in 3 households are women in 3 households are suffering from either mental, psychological, or economic abuse, which isn't even recognized as a form of violence in our society. So yes, and that is why these conversations are really important, that we come forward, share learnings, and come up with better interventions to advance the work that we are doing. Moving to the question that you have just asked, that why self-defense is important in empowering and prevention of gender-based violence in Pakistan. I'm going to connect it to what I earlier mentioned, that we, from a very early age, we have been brought up in an environment or in systems where we are taught to rely on men in our lives for support. For emotional support, for financial support, for support in terms of managing our day-to-day activities. And from that aspect comes in this notion of dependency, that we are, from a very early age, we are led to believe that we can't do this. We are not enough. We won't be able to survive on our own. We might not be able to excel at this or that. Like, I'm particularly talking about women here. So these healing circles, these safe spaces where we can have open and honest conversations and expressions, where women are able to, talk about their traumas, where they are able to talk about their stories, where they're able to talk about their learnings. Because if I would have to quantify, out of 10 times, at least at least one time you might have been in a position where you defended yourself, where you stood up for yourself. And we need to make them realize that one time that it happened, that is the normal. And the rest of the 9 times was something that you have been taught to believe. You have been taught to be invisible, and that is not right. So this is where these safe pockets and these circles and these, activities and workshops come in. And this panel discussion is actually giving me a lot of ideas that how we can bring in Asma into the work that we are doing, and how we can explore these conversations further with Aaminah, because at the end of the day we are working on prevention, but the work that Asma is doing is working towards elimination of these problems by presenting us with better interventions to resolve these problems at grassroots level. So concluding in a nutshell, self-defense, empowerment education is the first step that women and young girls need to be acquainted with at an early age, in order to recognize their rights, their worth, and the agency and the autonomy over their life, and the decisions that are associated with their life.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hira. That was insightful. Let me just take this opportunity to remind the speakers that we've got about 15 to 20 minutes left, and there's so much that I feel like the audience would like to hear from you. Asma, moving on. Also, I just got a message from DIG Sheeba, and she has apologized. She's got an emergency meeting coming in, and she thanks all of you for being here. So Asma, speaking about, laws here, do you think, and maybe what are your policy recommendations, are we doing enough to sort of inculcate that compulsion for learning self-defense, not just for our police officers, for our lawyers, for women working in the corporate sector, schools, universities? Do you think we're doing enough? And do we have any laws that sort of support, such an agenda?
Okay, so what Hira also was saying, and I believe you are moderating, so you can't talk about yourself, but I just want to take a brief moment and talk about Anza here for a second. Because Anza, even though she's moderating, she is, mashallah, very talented. She is I believe, a professional kickboxer, and she trains and she gives training to so many women in different areas, underprivileged, privately. So I believe Anza is doing a brilliant job on that. And I think we can have a little bit of a conversation about that, because this is primarily your area. And to what Hira said is actually what I agree with. And I'll come to your question as well, is that when you are a byproduct of the system, I'm talking psychologically post 16, 18, your confidence levels, obviously you can improve over time, but it's primarily like solidified. To what Hira said, when you're very young, self-defense can be used as a mechanism of feeling empowered, feeling undefeated, feeling, nobody can mess with me. So I believe that self-defense is like driving, like having the capacity to walk in public spaces, very small things, but they are elements that can make you feel very empowered. And I'm sure when you gave these trainings to younger girls, Anza, because this is primarily a topic, what was I want to ask you this as well, your reaction when you've trained so many young girls when it comes to self-defense? What were the reactions like? Because that's not somewhere I've been. So can you tell us about that a little bit? Even though you're moderating, I just want to ask you this because it's very relevant to the topic.
Thank you very much, first of all, for those kind words. I think a lot of these girls, especially the younger children, even women who are coming from all walks of life, they keep mentioning how after learning self-defense, they feel that much more equipped. So it also sort of, how Hira spoke about the healing part of the whole process. In my opinion, because I've worked with over, I think, 3,000 girls now, in my opinion, it helps speed up the process of healing in itself, because you feel like you are in control of your space, of your mind, of your body. Sports for social change have been one of the pioneers in Pakistan. It has, and Aaminah can, perhaps shed some more light on the psychological aspect, but it's very therapeutic, sports in general. And especially if you're doing something like kickboxing, one, it helps you vent your anger. We've heard a lot of that in the past as well. Secondly, it, helps with dealing with the kind of inequality and injustice that you feel. I will quickly narrate an incident where I was speaking with a girl who was earlier harassed by one of her uncles in the house, and she was not allowed to talk about it earlier because, obviously in Pakistan, we have those cultural taboos as well. One, you're not allowed to talk about any kind of abuse. Two, especially if it's coming from a family member, because log kya kahenge. So after taking those kickboxing clinics with us, she went back and she's like, next time, she went up to the gentleman and said, next time you come near me, I'm going to kick you in between your legs. And that in itself was very empowering. I have many of these anecdotes. I have many anecdotes to share, and I think it's also pretty impactful. I'm sure you have been dealing with a lot of similar cases where women earlier felt weak, and then after what you did for them, they felt empowered. And I think it's so important for women to be there for each other.
100%.
A lot of times, and since you are a lawyer, a lot of times in our country, unfortunately, Asma, what I've also observed is that young girls and women, especially from the rural areas, are afraid to go speak to law enforcement agents, or even lawyers for that matter. Becomes a problem.
Yes. And that is actually primarily related to the fact that again, we don't have enough female lawyers in Pakistan. And the reason why we don't have female lawyers is because it's 99% men. I mean, I come from a very privileged background. I just want to state that here. I come from a very, I come from a very privileged background, financially, politically. And because of those reasons, my parents are, alhamdulillah, amazing. They've let me travel around the world alone. They've empowered me to walk in spaces, cycle alone. So I've always had this autonomy. But that is the only reason why I believe I've been able to survive in the legal system of Pakistan. And that too, I'm talking surviving, not flourishing. It's like swimming against the waves. And there are many times that I actually don't want to practice anymore because, you feel like it's... I have a man with me who's surfing along the waves and making it to the beach. Meanwhile, I'm without a paddleboard and I'm just swimming recklessly, towards that area. So who's going to win this in this situation? But alas, to fight that has to continue. And this is one of the reasons why we absolutely have to have a minimum, I believe, a quota. Where you must have 40% of the kacheris chambers belonging to women. You must have fixed quotas where women are working, and definitely women are better. And unfortunately, if you go to Lahore, I believe Islamabad and Karachi are far better, but the smaller cities, even Lahore, is not doing very well when it comes to the legal practice, because the women that do end up practicing, they unfortunately have faced so many issues that they also become a byproduct of the system. So their responses to women and women facing violence is also pretty much like a man's, because they're like, we're so used to it. So yes, it is definitely... I think the only thing I've actually ever had to say to a client and they have the most, I just want to quickly touch base on very basic laws. It's actually no rocket science. Lawyers tend to over exaggerate laws and mention sections to sound more fancy, but it is not relevant to most of the public. So I'm just going to break it down. It is that if you ever face violence, if you've ever been raped, if you've ever been hit by somebody, please understand you must immediately go to the hospital, a civil hospital, or most importantly, go to the police. People say this, and Ma'am Sheeba is not here. My experience with the police so far, in particular in Lahore, smaller towns like Sialkot, they're a little difficult, easier to bribe, I suppose. But majority of the police is actually very facilitative. You go there, they will help you. Do not sit at home. Do not let the bruises go away. Do not let the rape or any of the assault that you've experienced, don't let a few days go by, because then the evidence is lost. There's a time frame that is lost. Please, if you face any violence, go to the police station, go to the main police station. Agar aapko ye bhi nahi pata ki hame kis police station mein jate hain, let's just say you live in, I'm going to give an example of Sialkot. Sialkot is a main small town and you have smaller districts around it. Same thing with Lahore. You go to any major police station, this government has actually made a smart system for all police stations. This is so revolutionary and has made our lives so much more easier. And this is not talked about enough, is where they have basically made most of the system for reporting police and crimes electronic. So it goes into a system. So you can go to any major police system and report that, I belong from Harbanspura, or I belong to DASTAK, or I belong to these districts, and you go to the main police station and they file the report. They give you a specific investigating officer and they link you with him. No matter where your in-laws are in some Sargodha, you faced violence in Sialkot, you went to a police station there, it doesn't matter. The system is now comparatively more aligned, which wasn't a thing before. Again, a revolutionary move. Again, one of the major positives we don't talk about. So
Right.
please,
That is very inspiring, Asma, but excuse me for being the devil's advocate, but a lot of times women also face violence in areas where they're supposed to feel safe. Case in point, I was watching a video that went viral the other day, and we saw a bunch of lawyers physically assaulting a woman. And I'm sorry, but I had to bring this up since you're here with us. What is the legal standing that you have? Do lawyers enjoy some kind of immunity? Do police officials enjoy some kind of legal immunity from all of this?
It was an absolutely atrocious move by lawyers. I mean, I fully publicly have always condemned this behavior, this gundagardi behavior. The lawyers, if they felt like there was something wrong that this woman had done, I believe that, are you so incapacitated as a lawyer, that you cannot respond with the appropriate legal action against this person? It was an absolutely atrocious thing that they did. I completely condemn it. They should be jailed. They can be jailed, and I'm sure they will be. Because unfortunately with the lawyers, it's more of like a mob mentality. In Pakistan, you have specific groups. You have the Tabligh group, you have the political groups, you have the lawyer groups, and they're this little cult, unfortunately, and they feel like they're untouchable. But that is not the case, because nobody's above the law. And I hope that they're caught. And many of the lawyers in our community, in particular those practicing, there's a whole movement going on inside where we are condemning this, and we're trying to work towards a place where we can, kind of filter out these, things. And unfortunately, the reason why you don't see a lot of lawyers that do criminal acts and, gundagardi as they call it, the reason why they are not held accountable is because thanks to our previous dictator, Mr. Zia, and, other people that changed the constitution. And even in the 90s, there were certain changes where basically the judges have the power to dismiss any lawyer. That is what the system is in Britain. So what happened was, and the bar councils actually came under the judiciary. And through that, you basically promote. So the lawyers were subservient to the judiciary. Now what has happened after the changes in the constitution is that the lawyers were given complete autonomy. They were put into independent bar councils. So the president of the bar councils were held responsible for holding the other lawyers accountable. But that does not happen because these bar council people are elected. They don't want to make majority of the lawyers unhappy. So they generally don't take any steps in regards to holding people accountable, because the mob mentality, the mob being 80%, 20% being educated, they are going to get votes from these mobsters. So this is one of the reasons why you don't have majority of these bar council presidents holding accountable. And the judges, unfortunately, do not have the power to dismiss or get rid of licenses of any of these lawyers because of the changes in our constitution that were completely separated. And now we are unfortunately in a position where if any kind of accountability is made towards the lawyers that, dismiss this person or whatnot, people start attacking judges. So judges are inherently a little bit they're not very powerful when it comes to the legal system. And this is one of the reasons why you see like a massive uprising of the mob mentality in the legal community, and we hope to address it and get better with it, because it just makes our lives hell, to be honest.
Right.
And I hope that we definitely get better. And yes, it is true that it does happen. We are not a perfect system, and this shouldn't be happening, but this should still not dissuade somebody from coming forward and making a stand, because I assure you that the system is very difficult, but it is not completely rigged against you. Please find a good lawyer is what I recommend.
Right. Thank you, Asma. And we'll hear more about the role of civil society in the whole process from Hira in the ending note. But before I go on to her, I would like to ask Aaminah to please share some more insights with her and her take home from this panel discussion today. Aaminah, over to you.
Thank you, Anza. I think my take home definitely is just the fact that empowerment is not just a mindset, right? There's a connection between your mind and your body and a support system behind you, right? We could, to the end of days, teach somebody how to defend themselves and tell them that they're enough and tell them that there's anything that they can do. But we need to also add on to that with a specific kind of support, right? And that was mentioned here today as well. Women supporting women is very important, because in a lot of spaces, at a lot of times, you don't get that kind of support at home, right? For a lot of people. And again, like Asma said, I think most of us come from a privilege of where our families supported us to be this empowered, which is such a strange thing to say as adults, that my parents allowed me to do this, but that's still our narrative, right? It's not a freedom oriented inherent word that you use, but recognizing that privilege and then supporting other women around us to kind of feel some kind of sense of, okay, there is somebody here who has my back, right? And through activism, through going into grassroots communities, through capacity building, equipping people with the kind of knowledge of communication, there's a whole bunch of things attached together, which starts with boundaries, which starts with teaching young girls it's okay to say no. Don't go to that relative and hug that woman or man if you don't want to. Right? That autonomy building starts from bachpan, and then again, coming back to the self-defense aspect of it, empowering your own body, making sure that you feel like, okay, I have my back as well, is really important. And then physical autonomy, joined with that mental autonomy of being a sentient being, perhaps. We talk about AI, but being completely empowered, knowing that you have number 3, that's support, because those two things together and then added on with support is really important. And then again, we need other people to be able to do that. So going to schools, allowing them to learn how to help children prioritize their boundaries, their mental health, going into grassroots communities and talking about this while respecting their cultural context. And I think, sorry to take up so much time, but just one thing that I've definitely learned is that there's a certain, because the empowerment is such a foreign concept to a lot of people, we often look to the West to see what it can look like. And it's not supposed to replicate that, right? And I think a lot of the backlash for the feminist community in Pakistan comes from, oh, you're looking at Western narratives. And yeah, if we go into the Western space, by the way, the Eastern woman doesn't have a lot of space there either. So we can't keep looking to the West for our version of feminism. It needs to take some cultural aspects into account, whatever that looks like. I can't comment on that right now, but we need to create our own model that is based on our sensibilities and is our version of empowerment. And we haven't seen that yet, of course, because we keep looking to other people for that narrative. But seeing all of these women here today, you guys are working in the local context. You guys are creating empowered communities. and you are the people that we should look to for that kind of narrative. Ki kya ho sakta, what can that look like? So that's pretty much what I'm.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
Aaminah. And Hira, I would request you to please share your final thoughts in today's session.
First of all, I feel really good that we had this conversation. I am actually really happy that today was the first day of 16 days of activism, and we initiated that campaign with such powerful conversations and so much to think about and so much to look forward to. Having said that, there is this, you could say, researcher or theorist. His name is Dr. Gabo, and I really follow his work on trauma and healing. And he says it's very important to realize when the body says no. And whenever we are in a situation where something which is not right, which is abnormal, which is stepping into our boundaries, which is not right, and in a nutshell, is happening to us, somewhere our body is sending us these signals that you need to step up, you need to say no, or you need to find that courage in order to break that cycle of violence. And that is where all of these healing circles, these empowerment circles, self-defense workshops, trainings, and community circles can play a very integral role in helping communities, particularly women, realize that it is very important to learn the word no. And you can say that to your spouse, you can say that to your father, you can say that to your mother, your sister, your friends, somebody you're in a relationship with, because at the end of the day, you should be your priority, your mental well-being, your health. And that when you are in charge and in control of yourself, that is when you can share the learnings and make the society and the world a better place for everyone around you. On this note, I'm just going to have two more comments where Asma shared a lot of important information with us regarding the legal processes and how to, look for a lawyer. So we have this platform which is called Wasila. My team has been working for almost 6 months in order to put together all the content and the data related to all the laws which are supporting women in Pakistan. There is a directory of psychological aid organizations, legal aid organizations, mental health organizations on that platform, where women can get all that information at one platform. This is the learning that I have, that I have realized by working, that all that information needs to be just a click away. At least it should be present somewhere and accessible for everyone. Secondly, I would also like to stress here once again that it is very important to not reciprocate the interventions that are already being done, but join hands to take the work to other communities and districts and grassroots level. For instance, Saving 9 is doing excellent work in the rural communities in Islamabad. So instead of doing the same work in the same areas, why don't we join hands and take that work to far-flung and other districts where it is needed? So civil society needs to come forward and put a brave and a collective and united front towards gender-based violence prevention in Pakistan, because we need new interventions, we need creative interventions, we need young voices, and we do not need reciprocation of what is being done. Because if it was being done the right way, we would have been where we wanted to 20, 30 years ago. So please, let's join hands. And this is the first of many conversations that DASTAK is going to organize. And I'm looking forward to support from all of you. And let's turn the world orange, because orange is the global color for the elimination of violence against women. And a very happy 16 days of activism to all of you. Let's continue this momentum for the next 16 days and the next year to come, and so on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hira, and all the panelists for joining us today. It has been insightful, to say the least, and we hope to hear more from you in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned tomorrow as well, and perhaps some surprises day after. We have some very meaningful conversations coming up from the platform of DASTAK through our TABEER Symposium. We'll also be doing a Connecting Classrooms initiative, which is going to connect a lot of female students from around the globe, some ESD graduates as well. We're also going to be in conversation with some parliamentarians and law enforcement agents of change, and internationally as well. We'll have a lot of speakers joining us. So if you haven't signed up yet, please be a part of the TABEER Symposium. Let's talk about the change that needs to come. And something from me, I wrote a poem about 8-9 years ago. It was read at UN Women. And if I may just quote 2 lines from it, I am the daughter of Eve. I am what they call God's final masterpiece. So look at me with admiration. Your oppression can no longer be justified by praising me in prose and song. Because ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're used to doing when we talk about women, be it all we glorify them for is their beauty, and in poems and songs and movies and Netflix, we're over glorified for our beauty. But let's start glorifying women for their strength and empowerment. That's all for today. I hope we gave you some food for thought. Thank you for bearing with us.